First Corinthians is Paul's letter to the church at Corinth, who had wandered off course in their journey with Jesus, even to the point where they needed to raise their hand and ask Paul for directions. So let me tell you how it happened. Around AD 51, Paul arrived in Corinth at the end of his second missionary journey. He had just left Athens, and he had one more stop in this bustling port city in southern Greece known as Corinth. And this city was known for two things: its pagan worship and its loose morals. But despite these obstacles, Paul preached the gospel with power, and many came to believe in Jesus. In fact, he was so connected to this new church family, he postponed leaving them and actually pastored them himself for 18 months. Now fast forward 4 years. It's now AD 55, and Paul hears word that the Corinthians weren't getting along. Of course, this saddens him, but then he gets a letter from them that actually heartens him. It's a letter in which they ask for clarity on a number of theological and church matters. So what does he do? With a deep pastoral affection, Paul writes this letter to correct their wanderings and to answer their questions. He tells them, "I'm not writing this to embarrass you or to shame you, but to correct you as the children I love." You see, bottom line, he steers the church back to the path of love. And we have in 1 Corinthians perhaps the most eloquent presentation of what true love looks like. And so it's no surprise that Paul summarizes the whole book's message in 1 Corinthians 16:14 by saying, "Do everything in love." So the book's structure is very simple. It's divided into two sections. In chapters 1 through 6, Paul deals with what caused their drift in the first place. It was their divisions. And then in 7 through 16, he deals with their uncertainties, the questions for which they had raised their hand and sought answers. So let's examine these two sections. First, there were divisions in the church. Divisions over leadership. They picked favorites. Division over how discipline was handled. Even division over whether lawsuits could be brought to the court. But Paul firmly rebukes this trend. He writes, "I appeal to you in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that there be no divisions among you." Zero tolerance for division. Why? He tells us, "Lest the cross of Christ be emptied of its power." See, when we divide Christ's church, we diminish and devalue the work of the cross. Then in the next section, chapters 7 through 16, the church faced all kinds of uncertainties for which they wanted answer. And Paul eagerly enlightens them on a number of these church-related practical matters, including marriage or worship or even giving. He meets them where they are, and he lovingly calls them to a higher standard of living. So what's the overarching takeaway from this book? I believe it's this: that we're all prone to drift in our journey with Jesus. And if we're not careful, a simple hairline crack can turn into a full-on church split. But Jesus, he calls us to a greater standard. He wants us to do everything we do in love. And when we bring his love into our church, our marriages, our service, our worship, that's when we become the unstoppable, love-filled hope carriers that God designed us to be.